Today's video features a very angry yellow-haired boy. Yup, I think it's time to see what exactly so much rage can accomplish. Let's do it.
Let the lesson begin.
Hey guys, Akariss here, bringing you another Fire Emblem Heroes video. Today's video is going to, much to my dismay, try to cover Dimitri. And I'm talking Fallen Dimitri here. So on my first impression, if you have watched my impressions video, you'll know that I was a little bit skeptical, and even through Twitch and some other discussions, I've come to kind of pass on Dimitri, especially since Fallen Edelgard seems to do exactly what she needs to do as a unit, compared to Dimitri, who just kind of seems like he's not really doing anything. But as we go through this video, I've given him a fair shot, and I think he can work in specific places. He's definitely not as much of a generalist, or maybe even as much of a specialist as Fallen Edelgard in comparison, but they're not really the same type of unit anyways. So yeah, I'm gonna jump into Dimitri. I'm gonna give him a fair shot, as objective as I can be, and he does deserve it. This did get asked quite a lot. So if you do like the Blue Lions and you like blue, don't forget to make that thumbs up under the video also blue. Yep. All right, first up is skills. So Vengeful Lance, again, at first impression didn't really seem that great because it has a bunch of conditions, but you gotta look at it maybe from another perspective. So it has a solo condition, it has 19 attack, effectively attack and speed +6 when he's solo, and then the second part is where things get interesting. So his attack needs to be higher than enemy defense. That's actually a really easy condition to meet, but there's an and clause that he cannot make a follow-up attack, and then he does an additional 50% of his attack minus the foe's defense. So essentially he gets half a hit when he can't follow up. And to be honest, I realize this isn't actually as bad as it seems when you want to use something that isn't basically null follow-up, or you don't have null follow-up in the weapon. So essentially this opens up his B slot to be something else, and he gets extra damage against enemies that use impact, or they use some deny follow-up abilities, or he just straight up doesn't outspeed them. Or there's other tricks to this sleeve, so to speak. So if you think about it that way, then it's a bit better, because essentially he always is going to do a lot of damage. If he doubles, he does a lot of damage. If he doesn't double, he does a lot of damage. That's the way I changed my perspective on Vengeful Lance, and therefore that gives him a little bit more purpose in the builds you might want to consider doing. So it's okay. A preference weapon is okay, exactly in the builds that you might want to think about, which I'll show, of course, throughout this video. So Murderous Lion, though. So this is also very different when you think about it. He is the only infantry unit that can use Canto as of this time. So Canto, Cavs, and Flyers right now, with like Tray skills and weapons and such that give Canto. He's basically the only one that now can use Canto as an infantry, and that is important, again, for a couple of reasons, but mostly because Canto is a great enabler for Galeforce. And a few people have said, okay, stop throwing Galeforce on all these units, but in reality, Galeforce is an amazing strategy, and you should try it. If you haven't made a Galeforce team, it's a good strategy to learn, and it takes care of teams that you otherwise can't end turn with Hector. Seriously. Or pardon, I guess, if you're following me. But anyways, so Canto, and of course it has that like lull speed defense in it, and it also has a wind sweep effect, which he can double through. Like if he has enough speed, he can double. So it is actually quite a packed B skill, and it generally shouldn't be replaced. But we'll talk about it further, but that is a very powerful B skill. The weapon is okay for what we're going to talk about, but the weapon does synergize well with his B skill. The only thing that really dampens all this is the fact that there's a bunch of solo conditions. And solo conditions don't lend themselves well to enemy AI, so like AR defense, I don't think he's that great there. And you shouldn't use them there, you should just straight up use Ingrid if given the option. And there's even blue Lance Cavs that are just F2P that I feel would do better. If you try to use them on defense, it's going to require a very specific type of defense where you're going to really rely on him to be kind of solo, either as a frontliner solo or overreaching through dances and Odd Tempest to reach something. So it's possible, but I feel like all of that has too much counterplay to make it consistent. So anyways, stats. This guy is very heavily stacked in attack speed and a decent defense stat, actually very similar to the legendary version of him, no surprise, and lacking in res. Res needs to be patched up quite a bit for him to be a carry. We'll talk about that in a moment again, but essentially if you use him in a way that isn't trying to rely on his res stat, he's going to get the job done in everything else. It also makes this weapon with the attack minus defense check actually matter. His fodder is solo 4 and Odd Tempest. Odd Tempest is a great thing to have in terms of fodder. Attack speed solo 4 is one of the best solos, if not the best solo you can have on multiple different carries. So he is packed in fodder, despite it only really being 2 skills. Let's jump into the builds. First one is the distant counter, and mostly just base kit, to be honest. So my issue with this is he has a almost unsalvageable res stat. So this is without any mythic blessings, but I feel if you're going to use Dimitri, it should probably be on Light Season. Light Season gives him air or dagger, potentially giving him res. So that really needs to happen, because otherwise he's going to suffer. This is a neutral one, but maybe even plus res is the way to go, and I'm sure in the next few builds I show you, that'll definitely be mentioned. So this is essentially just mostly base kit, and might want partners like Lance I feel would probably be best, just to get that glimmer off every time, but you'll realize he probably doesn't even need the glimmer to get most kills because of the weapon and the B skill interaction, just giving him tons of power. Mystic Boost really helps against healers, but that res stat is already very bad as it is. It will get a bit better in some of the later builds, but realistically, this is just unmerged, un-IV'd Dimitri, just to show you how being solo res can be a detriment. The thing I like about this, though, is by using base kit, you have a lot more flexibility in not only engagements, but disengagements. So you can get in and out really well, and Odd Tempest synchronizes really well with Murderous Lion. That extra movement contributes to getting in and out of a fight. He can essentially act as his own sniper and then tank what he wants to, except if traps get in the way. But smite, repositions, and dances can always help towards that effect. So base kit with distant counter should be okay, but let's talk more into changing out some of the things where you might not want to take advantage of Murderous Lion and Odd Tempest's flexibility, which is making him more standard as a tank. Now, I mentioned earlier with Vengeful Lance, if he doesn't get his double, he gets extra power. That actually synergizes fairly well with Null-C Disrupt, I feel. So if you bump up his res with a res IV, you use Mystic Boost, go into Light Season, get Air and Dagger, pumping up that res even further, you now can rely on Null-C to counter Fire Sweep foes and Dazzle foes, minimizing damage with Mystic Boost. Solo conditions pump up his power further, and Vengeful Lance ensures that if an impact-related foe hits you, like a Sturdy Impact Brammy or a Sturdy Impact, I don't know, Yoon or whatever, he's not going to miss a kill against Yoon, let's be real. But you know what I mean. Sturdy impact foes hit him, or someone who denies follow-ups in general through their weapons and such, or he just doesn't outspeed them. Vengeful Lance is going to give you that extra oomph to get the kills. So you don't need no follow-up because you're going to get it through Vengeful Lance. That is definitely something I can now appreciate out of the weapon, and effectively giving himself a somewhat open B slot. So if you really don't like his res stat and you don't like his weapon, and I might not blame you for that, then you can run the traditional null follow-up build if you have access to Flowing Lance, and it's essentially kind of the same thing, but you don't have to rely on that whole cannot follow up effect, because you really are relying on enemies maybe running impact effects. To be honest, you will probably see a lot of impacts. They're definitely all over there, so Vengeful Lance probably has a place, but the extra res and HP given by Flowing Lance is pretty good too. So again, all carry builds, I feel they work better in the player's hands because you can do things with the solo condition much better, or you have play options with Kanto to get in and out, get into a position where you feel most comfortable to tank enemies. Anyways, so some of the more different things he can do because he has access to Kanto and Tempest right off the bat is literally a Galeforce build. Now, I personally don't feel that Vengeful Lance fits in well to a Galeforce build. It doesn't have a slaying effect, and it's just a lot of power, but it's not necessarily contributing to how Galeforce works. He already has a super high attack and speed stat, so in reality, you can actually sub out this weapon for Slaying Lance, and later you'll see Curtains, because why not? He can do that. What is the most appealing part of him being a Galeforce unit is Murderous Lion, and the fact that he just comes with a Tempest anyways, which is a good C skill. So if you effectively infantry pulse him here with one ally, he can have a 2-charge Galeforce with Slaying Lance, and Odd Tempest plus Murderous Lion puts him exactly in the position you would probably want him to be at the end of turn, and that's unique to an infantry. Nobody else can infantry pulse the Kanto users in the game. They can't really special accelerate without something like Raphael or Valoria, but Dimitri can actually get infantry pulse by, let's say, Alphonse, or Sharena, or Anna, who might be a bonus unit you might be using. And that is definitely a unique aspect to him, which lends well to Galeforce strategies. So he is a solid candidate for that. He can also use Times Pulse, which if you wanted to sub out Tempest for Times Pulse, you could do that. However, I'm not, that does get rid of Odd Tempest, which I feel is very good for this strategy combined with Murderous Lion. Personally, I think that's really important, but if you don't have access to Infantry Pulse or Times Pulse or whatever, then you might have to use Times Pulse, I guess. Anyways, Curtains is next. We got this for free. If you haven't used it yet and you really want to use Dimitri in where I feel he will shine best, then Curtains is better than Slaying Lance in this particular scenario, because with Quick Impulse, he gives his own special acceleration without relying on any infantry pulse, Times Pulse, keeps that mobility, keeps Kanto, and slaughters all his enemies, as he canonically should. So yeah, and finally, a defense-ish build that I know some people will probably ask about. So if you can truly get him into a position to be solo on defense, and I feel this requires a lot of effort, then he gets a lot of power. But getting him into those positions, I feel, is difficult, and I don't really recommend this at all. Between this and the next one, they're very difficult to get him into those solo conditions. I've tried with solos on defense, and I've even seen many replays where, because I'm using solo skills, they end up faltering completely. An interesting mechanic, though, is Wind Sweep. Wind Sweep denies his own double and always activates Vengeful Lance. That's assuming you're solo. So that is a very interesting mechanic or interaction. But his OGB skill already gives him like Wind Sweep as long as he's solo. So, you know, it's just something interesting to mention. I don't see where it would matter for now, but he could work on defense given a good amount of effort. Now, for the sake of immersion and to give you guys thinking about how you can effectively use Dimitri, I want to bring up yesterday's Fallen Edelgard AR map, okay? So if you were to use Dimitri into a map like this, and this is just for fun, don't take it too seriously, guys, you would want him to probably be running something like a Galeforce strategy. And because of Kanto, you can do some very interesting things here, right? So Dimitri begins in a position like this on turn 1. You have to act on turn 1. If you were to smite him up into the enemy team, you are likely hitting the lightning trap 2 spaces above, which, real or fake, doesn't really matter in reality. So as long as you're running 2-charge Galeforce, you then could engage on one of the enemies and then Kanto back. Now, if you did something like this, it's again an interesting mechanic to Dimitri because he can retreat, maybe even land on the other lightning trap, depending on how you play it, activate both lightning traps, set up a whole Wings of Mercy scenario throughout your whole team if you're running more than one dancer, or even more Galeforce units, dance him as he retreats, the dancers themselves don't need to overextend, and start slaughtering many opponents on the enemy team. That is definitely, again, something really cool that Dimitri can do, and because he is the way he is, being infantry, with Kanto, it's much easier to accelerate him than it is, let's say, Regan to do this, or Flyers, for example, because they would always need access to Valoria or Reveal or something else. This is as simple as like potentially a Slaying Lance and 1 Infantry Pulse with a bunch of Dancers that you could pull off something like this. Again, this is all hypothetical. Don't take it too seriously. He might just literally lose because he doesn't meet attack defense checks. Maybe the lightning traps aren't exactly where you thought they would be. Maybe you misplay. I'm just giving you a very visual idea here on why Dimitri could be more unique than I initially gave him credit for, and maybe what most people initially gave him credit for. I don't think this is the best iteration of him, but he does have something unique going for him, and that is the purpose of today's video. So thank you guys for watching as always. If you made it this far, thank you so much. Let me know what you think of Dimitri in the comments below. I tried to give him my due diligence. I tried to be objective. I did not dismiss him. So yes, feel free to let me know what you think. Give video a thumbs up with those bluish hands with the finger upwards, and subscribe if you haven't already. If you really like this content, you want to keep seeing it going, it really helps a lot if you guys contribute if possible. There's a join button now, there's a Patreon, maybe Twitch Prime if you want to do any of that. Thank you guys, love you all. See you in the next one. Peace.
It's over.